Let's talk about lower consciousness and higher consciousness. Now, everything is consciousness, but there's experiences at certain stages, you could say, certain levels of consciousness, certain experiences that are experienced. So we'll kind of contrast the two, lower consciousness and higher consciousness. And we can even say that there's another level beyond that, which we could say is super consciousness or enlightenment. But let's just leave that out of this this video. Let's just contrast the two and see the spectrum. The spectrum. So we can talk about consciousness as in the level of openness. When consciousness is fully open, well, that's enlightenment. That's full consciousness. You could say that's super consciousness. So in lower consciousness, consciousness is very contracted. It's a very contracted state. And as consciousness, basically, you could say as it rises or on the higher levels of consciousness, as it opens up, well, then it becomes more open, right? Less closed and more open. Just like contracted in lower consciousness, and as it moves, a lot of the language doesn't work here. As it opens up or expands, then it's more expanded. Lower consciousness, contracted. Higher consciousness, expanded. Lower consciousness, closed. Higher consciousness, open. Right? Now, when I'm talking about these contrasting it, it's not a black and white. It's not black and white. There's a spectrum, right? If higher consciousness is here, well then, and lower consciousness is here, as it opens, there's more opening. Little opening, more opening. Even more opening, right? So it's a spectrum. Contracted, and then less contracted, less contracted, less contracted, which is experienced as more expanded. Power is another thing. Lower consciousness, powerlessness. This feeling that you can't do anything. From the relative perspective, from the perspective of the ego mind, you feel powerless. From the perspective in higher consciousness, it's empowerment, right? There's you can do something. There's willingness. There's courage, right? There's discipline. Lower consciousness, there's not that. Lower consciousness is very much the victim mentality, the victim state of consciousness. And I talk about this in other videos where as long as we're blaming external circumstances and we're not taking responsibility for ourselves, we're not taking responsibility for everything, for our life, then we are giving away that responsibility. And responsibility is your ability to respond. And if you don't have the ability to respond, you feel powerless. So victim state of consciousness, lower consciousness is really this disempowered state, right? So as we move up from lower consciousness to higher consciousness, then we become more and more empowered. We become more and more powered. We can also look at the spectrum, the two, as lower consciousness is very destructive. So we have destructive to life, lower consciousness, and then higher consciousness, supporting life. It's more supportive to life. In every sense, even with just yourself, a lot of the destructive behaviors, it's that we engage with in lower consciousness, it's destructive to our health, our well-being, and yet we are still doing it. Negative thinking is very destructive. It's destructive to your mental well-being, right? So there's less of that experience in higher consciousness. Higher consciousness, there's more, positive affirmations, less negative thinking, right? Self-care, right? Self-care is really the pivot from lower consciousness to higher consciousness. When we really become more conscious of these destructive patterns that I'm participating in my life, I need to change them, right? Because lower consciousness is everything is subconscious. We're very unconscious to a lot of things. So we can't see these destructive patterns. But as they start surfacing, light is another thing. Lower consciousness is darkness. Higher consciousness is less darkness. As more of those patterns are being brought to the light to be seen and exposed, then we see them. There's more awareness so that we're able to see them. So then comes this, let me change these patterns, these destructive patterns. Let me now take care of myself. Let me appreciate myself. Let me honor myself, honor my body, honor my mind, support this life, right? So destructive, less destructive, or destructive, supportive, right? What else can we say? Awareness, very, very much, that we're talking consciousness. Unaware, more aware, right? More aware. And again, that spectrum. The amount of happiness that you experience, less happy, not happy at all, not happy at all. It's very tragic, miserable down here in lower consciousness. And then experiencing a little bit more of that happiness kind of shine through, right? From like the ego standpoint, very egoic. And then it's still like there's a lot of ego there, even like in kind of the middle where there's a lot of pride, big ego, but then it starts dissolving. It's more of a healthy ego, a mature ego, you can say. Lower consciousness is very immature. Higher consciousness is more mature. Where you'd say like, oh, this person's like an old soul, right? There's more maturity. There's more experience. They're more, the mode of consciousness is functioning more so at that higher consciousness where it, feels like it's like an old soul, right? What else can we say? Yeah, so with the ego, more ego, and then more of a dissolved ego. It's like the ego is becoming more thin. Because it's more thin, more of that happiness, the peace, the love is shining through. Lower consciousness, no love, not experiencing love. Higher consciousness, you're experiencing more love. Lower consciousness, purely conflict, war, conflict, battle. Higher consciousness, you're experiencing a little bit more peace. You're getting like glimpses of it, of the peace. Resistance, lower consciousness is at resistance with everything, right? Resistance. It's not this. I don't want this, right? I want something different. Resisting everything, just resisting life, resisting yourself, resisting life, resisting people in your life, resisting everything, right? Higher consciousness, less resistance. There's now more acceptance. There's more allowance, right? Allowance could be said as the opposite of resistance. Instead of rejection, which is lower consciousness, then there's more and more acceptance, right? Which is the opposite. Lower consciousness, a lot of holding on to, a lot of grasping and clinging to things, ideas, beliefs, identities, concepts, people, possessions, materials, everything, holding on to everything. Higher consciousness, still holding on, just maybe not holding on to as much. Again, when you're holding on to less things, there's more of this sense of freedom. Because you can't be free if you're holding on to something. If I'm holding on to this table, I'm not free, right? So anything that you're holding on to is a obstacle in the way of freedom. And that's holding on to yourself as well. Holding on to who you think you are. To let go of that is freedom. That's why I usually say there's no freedom for the person, there's only freedom from the person. So letting go of the person that you think you are, letting go of that completely, there's freedom. There's no one to experience that freedom. There's no person to experience that freedom, but there's freedom. What else can we say? We talk about resistance, holding on, freedom, right? Not free, right? Very imprisoned. And what we're imprisoned is not prison to some sort of external system. It's really the prison that we've created, the prism of the mind, the prism of our thoughts, our beliefs, right? I've said that in other videos, that beliefs are basically, belief systems are prisons, right? It's like the walls of the prisons are the beliefs that we believe. And there's some very limiting beliefs, and then there's some less limiting beliefs, but all beliefs are limitations. Rigidness, more rigid in lower consciousness, more flexible in higher consciousness. Rigid mind, less rigid mind, more of a flexible mind, right? Even though we talked about at the start, openness. Closed mind, open mind, right? And obviously that spectrum. Rigid mind, not so flexible mind. Rigid in just a lot of things, preferences, opinions, rigid in your position where you're standing. I'm right wing or I'm left wing, right? Just again, it's like holding on to that identity. There's a very strong identification in lower consciousness with the body, and that then is less and less as we move up into higher consciousness. It becomes more and more not so much with the body, but more and more with the mind. And then you go higher up, then there's kind of, hopefully there's this, is there more to this? Is there more to the life than just the body and the mind? Right? You start having those kind of questions, which is because you're more open. Someone who's closed, that doesn't even come in contact. They can't handle it. A closed mind can't handle things like that. There's more, this wants security more, values security more, wants to be secure, right? Secure, not free. That which is secure is not free. So there's more security. There's more fear, right? There's more fear because there's holding on to everything. Well, when I'm holding on to certain things, this is mine, that's mine, this is mine, right? As the ego. Well, now because I'm holding on to certain things, I'm trying to possess things. Well, now there's a fear of losing it. Oh no, what if I lose my computer? What if someone takes my tea? Right? You don't want to lose, right? It's this loss, which then you're in this kind of chronic fear of losing things. And we've talked about this in other videos. Fear is always about what does not exist. It's always this about the future. About the future. There's definitely more of a lower consciousness being stuck in the past. As we move up into higher consciousness, is definitely more of a driven by the future. Both are not optimal because both are purely dream. They don't exist. There's only the present moment, but that's not really experience. In the higher states of consciousness, you're definitely getting more and more of the present moment. There's the strong identification, talked about that, the strong sense of me, self-image, the me, the I, the image of me. That's very existent, very prevalent in lower consciousness. In higher consciousness, it's like I said, it's more dissolved. It's there, but you can catch times that it's not there a little bit more. Taking in a beautiful sunset, and then it comes in, I should take a picture of this and show my friends, post it on Instagram, get likes, get validation, right? It wasn't there for just a second. There's just the experience. There's just the awareness of the experience. And then it's like, I want to get back to that moment. I want to get back to that present moment. Well, the present moment is always here. The problem is you always leave it. You're leaving the present moment. Caught up in the future of posting that picture on Instagram and doesn't exist. It's all projection. What else can we say? Power, love, happiness, right? Not happy, little happy, or peace, freedom, rigidness, resistance, clinging, grasping, holding on to. In lower consciousness, we're dealing with the shame, which is really rejecting yourself. We're dealing with the blame, the shame, the grief, right? The loss, the apathy, the powerlessness, the jealousy, envy, the comparison, the comparing yourself to others, right? The not happy, right? You're not happy with what you have. You're resisting. Well, is this it? Come on, I want greed. I want what they have. I want more, right? Ego, more. Lower consciousness is very, we get into some of this laziness and just no vitality. The vitality is then increased in higher consciousness. Again, like no power. How can you feel like doing things when you don't have any power and you don't have this energy running through you, connected to the source? You don't feel like you're plugged in. Then you feel like, where's the wall? Where's the outlet? I need to plug myself in. And we usually, because we can't find that source, we're unaware of it in the lower consciousness. We feel like we're always low energy, low on batteries. Need to plug ourselves in, right? So usually a lot of sicknesses and ailments and just not experiencing well-being, right? Higher consciousness, you're starting to tap into the source. You're starting to experience some self-healing. You're starting to rejuvenate, regenerate on your own through that connecting to a higher power, connecting to your source self, connecting to whatever you want to God, whatever you want to call it. So a lot of the heavy emotions, lower consciousness, the shame, the guilt, the grief, the blame, the fear, right? Then when there's now this starts maturing, then there's a lot of comparing ourselves to others, right? There's the separation, there's hatred, there's jealousy, there's envy, there's pride, arrogance. You're better than other people, right? Right, and that's where it kind of tops out there, right? That's for like a lot. It's even like that's even in higher consciousness is that pride, because then even people like in higher consciousness, there's a very developed intellect, a very a good collection of knowledge, everything that book knowledge. I've read it in a book, so we stack up all the things that we know, and we hold on to it. We don't want it. One, we don't want to lose it. Two, we don't want other people to then challenge that, because then it's seen as like a position of what you've learned. This is my favorite philosopher. This is my dogma, concept, my ideology of the world. And I see that you've got yours, and I don't want to give up mine. So you know what? Let's fight. And I'm going to try and fight you to adopt my belief system and dogma. And if we have two different views of life, then we're then at war. That's kind of in this intellectual, right? You see this with debates and stuff, right? And that's where it kind of really tops out. Because beyond that, that's all the good stuff. It's not like that, but it kind of is. It kind of is, because then you're starting to experience joy and love and peace, and that's all beyond the mind. It's all beyond the mind. You're tapping into intuition, just this inner knowing that's you know things beyond logic. You're able to arrive at certain answers without some sort of linear progression of working things out, right? And those are, you're experiencing some, like I said, you're experiencing some of that in higher consciousness. You're definitely experiencing some of those in higher, the really high levels of consciousness. Yes. What else can we say? You're the amount of ease, right? You're like, it's again like dis-ease, right? Without dis meaning without ease, right? And then you see that state of mind without ease, right? Dis-ease. It's like a dis-eased mind, dis-eased body, right? When you talk about healthcare, we say the word like disease, right? But it's dis-ease. So when there's ease, right? There's balance. There's balance, then there's well-being. There's well-being, right? So it's about having a balanced mind, balance emotions, balance body, right? So a lot of dis-ease, right? Disharmony, lower conscious, and then we start, kind of getting a sense for, I want to be aligned with life. You're starting to look for alignment. You're starting to look for balance. You're starting to look for harmony, right? So you're coming into balance. You're coming into alignment. You're coming into harmony with something that's greater. Even on that lower state of consciousness, it's kind of like, like the world revolves around me kind of thing, right? And we see this like really top out in pride, where it's like, again, like everything's around me, and there's a very like, again, like that arrogance. You're better than everyone. You're kind of talking down to other people. Other people are serving you, right? Higher consciousness, it's there's, because that pride is then being dissolved, there's more humility. So you're not thinking about yourself as something so great, and everyone's got to serve you, and you're better than us. There's none of that. Like I said, spectrum. So as you go higher, there's less and less of it. So you start to see like yourself as a part of life. You start to see the bigger picture and how you're a part of that big picture, right? Whereas, especially in pride, it's like, it's a big picture because you got a big head and it's filling the entire picture. That's kind of, that's kind of the comparison, right? One's like, here's a nice picture of like the universe, and it's a big, cosmic galaxy, and there's a tiny little dot with an arrow, and it says, me. Whereas the one with the pride, it's just a big bobblehead picture, big head, and it's like busting out of the frame, and then it's like me, right? So it's different. What else have we not mentioned? Like the amount of light, the amount of awareness. Also the amount of light when we talk about heaviness and lightness. Lower consciousness feels very heavy. It's very dense. Higher consciousness, less dense. And there's a lightness to it. Lower consciousness, very seriousness. Taking life serious. Taking yourself serious. Higher consciousness, less and less serious. Obviously with the seriousness, less play, a little bit more play. Less creative, because again, remember, lower consciousness is destructive, so there's less of that creativity. There's more creativity in the higher consciousness. Where you're creative. Less self-expression, more self-expression. Less flow, so you feel stuck. Less flow, so you feel stuck, and then here more flow, higher consciousness. Just give me a second. Let me see if something pops. Definitely a lot more like, again, it kind of with the fear is this, not accepting, right? Rejecting death, not accepting death, fear of death, lower consciousness. Here, there's more and more of that acceptance, right? Accepting, because you're accepting yourself, you're accepting life, you're also accepting all parts of life. You're accepting, okay, I get it. Everything that's born shall die. Okay, I get it. Right? We might not want to accept it even in the lower stage of higher consciousness, but as it's more and more accepted, right? And it just kind of shows, right? It's very taboo. No one wants to talk about death. Oh, you're such a downer talking about death. But it's like, well, why are we going to pretend that it's like not going to happen, right? You look at everything else. We make believe like we know everything else, right? That we actually know things when really we don't know things. Everyone just pretends that they know things. But the only thing that you know is that the body's born and the body's going to die. No one makes it out alive with their body, right? So why do we pretend like that's not the reality? It's because we don't want to face that truth. Brings us to the next. Lies, lower consciousness, less lies. Less lies as you move up. There's more of a kind of searching for truth. There's more of a valuing truth more. And it's all like relative truth. That is quite a lot that we kind of mentioned. And there's more, right? There's so much more. There's so much more. We're just talking in terms of like expansion, energy, light, awareness, love, joy, peace, freedom. Ease, health, well-being, wholeness, right? So broken, really broken, lower conscious. I'm so broken. I'm only half. I need someone to complete me. And I'm ashamed of myself, and my self-worth is really bad, is really low. So I need someone to complete me. They're my better half, right? You see this, you can hear this with how we say, right? So there's more and more of this feeling more and more complete in higher consciousness, or feeling less and less broken, you can say. Because again, like you can see how a lot of these things are intertwined. Well, if you don't accept yourself completely, how can you feel complete? So as we move up into higher consciousness, we're accepting more and more parts of ourself, right? There's more and more awareness so that we're seeing more parts of ourself, and there's less fragmentation, meaning that we're saying, a lot of people do this, so I got a good Mitch and I got a bad Mitch, and some days the bad Mitch shows up, kind of thing, right? Creating this kind of what are they called? Schisms, right? Where we're fragmenting ourselves, creating the split personality. This one shows up on some days and this one shows up on the weekends, kind of thing, right? And this one I don't really want to let anyone know, right? It's like the Jekyll and Hyde. I think that's what they are. Anyways, the two sides, right? So there's that fragmentation, really fragmented, really broken, right? Less and less, right? Because again, there's more light to see, there's more awareness, there's more acceptance. As I'm accepting more and more parts of myself, I'm feeling more and more complete. Obviously, the only way to feel complete is to be in full acceptance, unconditional acceptance, to accept the totality, so that then I feel complete and whole. Can't feel whole when we're rejecting parts of ourselves. You, go away. You, I don't want to see you. Not looking, right? Lower consciousness is very much bury the head in the sand. Doesn't want to see. It's very much in denial. Strong denial in lower consciousness. Higher consciousness, less and less denial, right? It's again, you can see how a lot of these things are tied in. There's more denial because it's very immature. The state of the mind is immature. The ego is immature. It can't handle the big truths, like the body's going to die, right? All is one. It can't handle these truths. So it's out of burying the head in the sand and not seeing it as it's like a protective mechanism, because the entire illusion it can't handle it. It will just crash. Can't handle it. The mind is not mature. It's not prepared enough to really handle that. What basically breaks the ego, right? Enough blows to the ego, it's going to break, right? But then that could also create some sort of psychosis if the mind's not mature enough. And that's why a lot of people are in denial. They don't want to see it. They don't want to see the truth. That whatever has happened, whatever experience, sometimes they just want to bury their head and not look. To others of higher consciousness, like how can this one not see it? They can't see it. They don't want to see it. They don't want to see it because it will be the end of them as an ego. So it's a protective mechanism. It's a very survival mechanism. Whereas like in higher consciousness, it's more mature, so it can handle some of those bigger, okay, I get it. Yeah. Oh, coming to terms with death, that there's going to be death of the body. They don't know what it is, so we just project what it's like. Lower consciousness is very much, I heard this thing called death, but I want to project that there's going to be something better after, that there's this place to go to after. It doesn't want to die though, to go find out, but it wants to believe in something. Whereas the more and more higher up, the more mature, and then I don't want to just believe. I want to know. I need to know. I just believe in some afterlife or something I want to know. So then, like I said, there's a little bit more of a conscious seeking, which you call it like spirituality. Seeking your true nature, seeking, is there something after this? Is this all there is? What's the nature of existence? What is the ultimate reality? These type of questions can only arise in a mature mind, a mature ego that wants to look. Lower consciousness is very much survival. And that's really what we're kind of stuck in as humanity, is we're just, when you look at it, we're just trying to survive better. We're not thriving. We're just surviving. And some of us are surviving better. So really the ego is just a survival. It's preserving, it's self-preservation. It's a survival activity. So that's what we're kind of in, even when we say like, we're like, when people say like, actualize your full potential or like whatever it is. And it's like just getting a good job. It's like, it's not really actualizing your full potential. It might feel like that, but it's not really. It might be for at that, let's say, level of consciousness, perhaps, but your ultimate human potential, that's nowhere near it. Because what you're talking about is just basically just getting a good job, right? You're still just eating and sleeping. You might be sleeping more comfortably, eating more. That's what I mean. We're just surviving better, right? We're not actually thriving. We're not thriving. Lower state of consciousness is it's very competitive, right? Because when there's surviving, there's now I gotta, carry a sword around, and I gotta always be looking over my shoulder for someone that's gonna try and steal what I'm holding on to. Remember, I'm holding on to certain things, so I'm afraid of losing it, especially afraid of losing it to someone else that's trying to take it from me. So now I gotta protect myself. I gotta arm myself. And when I'm talking about arm myself, I'm not literally talking about with a weapon. Although that does happen. I'm talking about metaphorically. We arm ourselves. We put on this shielding, this armor. We have a metaphorical sword and shield. Trying to, when you hear someone says, "I'm offended," that means that someone has created an offense to them. That someone's on the offense. They feel now they have to defend themselves, right? They're defending their position. They're defending their belief. There's all sorts of things to defend. And it's with, like I said, lower consciousness. We're not experiencing any love, right? Very little. We can't perceive the true love that's here. We can't because we're wearing all this armor. We're wearing all this armor, right? Love is here, and it's now, and it's so subtle. It's so subtle that you need to be fully open. Remember, higher consciousness, less and less closed, which means more and more open. You need to be fully open so that you're able to receive that love. You're able to feel it because you're sensitive, because you're open. You've removed all the extra layers that you've added to yourself so that now you can perceive love. But even that's really, really high level of higher consciousness. Because you're not really perceiving it with a big ego, pride. You're not able to perceive love unless you're vulnerable, and vulnerability is removing the armor, right? Exposing yourself, being vulnerable, right? Exposing yourself because you're removing the armor that you've put on. That's that we wear in lower consciousness, you can say, for lack of better words. That's so yeah, there's a survival, there's competition, right? Higher consciousness, it's like, oh, what's this cooperation? You mean we can all get along? Yes. As it doesn't look that way right now, but as a human species, as the one species, yeah, what if we all just got along? What if we just spent, 1% of our energy getting along? We can accomplish great things, right? Because we're definitely not getting along, right? So this cooperation, this oneness, right? If all is one, then why are we at war with each other? Why are we attacking again? Because the separation is so strong in lower consciousness. And then there's less and less. There's like no empathy in lower consciousness, and then in higher consciousness, yeah, someone told me I'm an empath, right? And that's again a little bit of a trap, because then we get identified as an empath and we create this specialness. The ego creates a specialness of, so a book told me I'm an empath and I can feel other people's feelings, so I must be an empath. So that's going to be my new title. I'm going to be an empath, right? It's not. Yes, that happens, but really what's happening is the consciousness is opening up. As it's opening up, it's expanding, and as you're expanding, your sense of self is now, you're able to expand, and you're feeling the energy fields of others. You're able to feel their emotions as if they are your emotions, because of that expansiveness, because of that openness, because of the sensitivity. That's why you're able to feel it. Right? But when we cling to this empath and want to be identified and want to create this specialness out of the empath, then it's something that's in the way. Because really the higher up you go in higher consciousness, the more you need to let go of. That's the thing with, you could say spiritual growth or spiritual evolution. In order to grow, you got to let go. The more you let go, the more you grow. Right? Lower consciousness, it's a lot of building up the ego, the personality, building up the person, adding to you. What do I need? I need some new gadget and material and car and this and that, right? It's all this building up, right? Which then creates more and more blockages. Whereas in higher consciousness, you're starting to then realize that the most growth that you've ever experienced is always in times when you've lost something, when you've let go of something, let go of a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a home, a job, a business, a pet, like any sort of thing. It's something that you're holding on to that you've let go, and you go, whoa, that now what you feel is, after that experience, I feel lighter. I feel like more energetic, more open, more expanded, more aware, a shift in, like, that's where there's been a shift. There's been a new kind of an aha moment, a realization, something kind of happened, right? There's greater truth that's discovered in that situation, in that truth of that situation. And you feel like you get some wisdom, some sort of experience from it. That's what's happening. A deeper understanding of the situation. And it's always happening. You can see that in your life. Because obviously, to come this type of video, you'd be in higher consciousness. Someone in lower consciousness doesn't get this video, does not find them. It's almost like there's an incompatibility thing, right? Where it's, again, you could say things, but then that's always going to be distorted in lower consciousness. Sometimes in lower consciousness, because how the ego, basically there's a censoring that's happening at all the states of consciousness, where you're not able to understand anything that's at a higher level of consciousness than your own. So there's like a built-in censor. So someone could be speaking the highest truths, even though the highest truth is actually unspeakable. But they're talking about some high-level stuff, as I share. But you say that in a room of 10 people and it's like 9 people, you kind of sound like the wah, 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 like that Charlie Brown kind of, they can't hear it. They can't hear it. They completely tune you out. Or they can't hear you, and they're kind of, I can't hear what that person sounds like a bunch of crap, nonsense. Let me just create my own story. And they just kind of, all their attention is off of the speaker and then onto their, drama of a story that they're creating. Kind of works like that. Not literally, but it's very much of a censoring. And you can see these things, not to make the video longer than what it needs to be, but you can see that our society is very much lower consciousness right now. You can see that our society is very much a victim state consciousness, right? Big government got to take care of the people because the people don't want to take care of themselves, right? Always got to, the healthcare system, they're gonna look after me, right? Because I don't want to look after my own health. No, that's going to take responsibility, right? So it's, again, when there's this blaming other people for my problems. There's a blaming of the system, right? It's the blaming of the system, right? Why not just take the responsibility, right? Because we don't want to, because responsibility is really, it's the essence of maturity. The more responsibility you have, right, the more mature you are. The more responsibility you take, because responsibility is never given, it's only taken. When you take responsibility, you're taking back your power. And that happens as we mature. But yeah, going back to, you can start seeing this in just our society as a culture, that we're very much locked into a fear state, right? And you look at the masses, very much locked in this fear state, very much locked in desires, right? The wanting, I want more, more, more. It's this consumerism, right? This greed. I always want more, right? Really, I want to kind of take this video too high level, but really this wanting more, you'll never be satisfied. If you've seen this in yourself, that you always want more, whatever it is. Sex is good, but you want more. Food is good, but you want more. Money is good, but you want more. Shelter is good, but you want more, right? Whatever it is, you always want more, because what you're actually looking for is you don't want more, you want all, because your true being is infinite. It's infinity. So you never be satisfied until you get infinity, you can say. You're never going to be satisfied. More and more and more. You're never going to be satisfied until you become everything. But the truth is, you're already everything. But just from the perspective of the ego, it wants more, more, more. Because it's kind of like, it's almost like there's this a residue of the infinite being that you are, that just knows. There's something that knows that you're everything. But as the separate self, it's like trying to, still wants that. So we're seeking it in ways that we can't. You can't be infinite by eating. You can't be infinite by having a lot of sex. You can't be infinite by owning multiple properties. You can't be infinite by, it's not how you discover it, right? It's not how you discover it. So we look at it in certain ways. We do this with a lot of things. We want to be happy. But we're looking to be happy in the bottom of an alcohol bottle. We're looking to be happy in smoking weed. We're looking to be happy in cocaine and LSD. We're looking to be ecstatic in ecstasy. These are all things that you can actually experience in those really, really high states of consciousness, and they're actually like, they're your essence. That everlasting happiness, the everlasting joy, the everlasting love, peace, freedom, that's what you are. But when we're looking for it in materials and experiences, we don't find it. We don't find it. It's very much a mirage. It's not there. So you can start seeing how a lot of this stuff, we look at the humanity as like a collective. It's like a collective ego. And it's basically the collective is, it's like an average of our state of consciousness. It's like a big ego, and you'd be like, okay, on average, it's kind of high to medium, lower consciousness. I know that probably doesn't make sense. Here's lower consciousness, bottom is the table. High consciousness is up here. It's like right there. Maybe let's give it a little bit more, like that. Right? So it's like you start seeing, again, locked in fear, not having courage, no acceptance, always in resistance, feeling contracted, small, jealous, envy, consumerism, greed. If we move that just a little higher up, right, what really kind of dominates, you look at like North American like business and is like intellect and business, and it's like pride and this success, right? It's very much in this kind of pride, which is very much like the top tier of lower consciousness. So it's kind of neat to see it, because it actually helps you become more aware of your own mind when you start seeing it. And that's the kind of thing, is once you start seeing your own mind, and these patterns, you start seeing it in society. But you got to be careful too, because another, like characteristic, you can say, of lower consciousness is projection. We're always projecting, but there's really some strong projection in lower consciousness, where it's this projection and denial and like, you're jealous, not me. You've got pride, not me. You're evil, not me. It's everyone is wrong, but not me, right? It's funny when you see it, right? But it's so we can see the jealousy, we can see the consumerism, we can see the greed, we can see the hatred, we can see the fear, we can see the guilt, we can see the shame of the collective. We can go, yeah, I can see that about society. But if someone like me but can you see that in yourself? What are you talking about, Mitch? It's not in me. No way. No, I'm pure. There's nothing like that in me. Yes, there is. It's in us all. And that's the thing, is by seeing it, then you can start changing it. You can start undoing it. You can start purifying, right? Undoing yourself, dissolving yourself. You start to see it. But if we are just saying that stuff happens out there and not in this one, right? Then again, like you see, we're in denial. We're too closed. We don't want to see it. We're too immature to handle those. We're too immature to handle that there's some dark, evil thoughts that pop up. We're too too much of a coward to look at the fact. We're too much of a coward to face our own fears, right? What are we afraid of, right? We're afraid of our feelings, a lot of us. I don't want to feel this. No way. Yuck, right? Takes some maturity to feel some of these feelings, right? So it's kind of cool when you start seeing these in yourself levels, and no way it's like just locked. It's kind of like what happens. It's almost like the sine wave. You kind of fluctuate, right? And what you'll notice is some of these lower states of consciousness, shame. If you can drop the shame by accepting yourself unconditionally, boom, you feel like you spring up, right? Because again, it's like a spring. It's in this contracted state. It's contracted like a spring, right? And then you can let go of something. You let go of that shame by accepting yourself unconditionally. And then it's like, oh, you let go of something that really held you down to the bottom. Boom, it's like the level of consciousness can shoot up. You get this opening. Not a full opening, but you get this wow, it's open. I feel lighter. Yeah, you feel lighter because shame is heavy. Most people they're dragging around their shame, right? Right? They're so ashamed. Ashamed of their body, ashamed of their past, ashamed of their addictions, ashamed of their past trauma, whatever it is, right? So it's acceptance, it's forgiveness, but these are higher levels. These are higher states of consciousness, right? Forgiveness is in the higher states, right? So it's kind of cool because once you start seeing it, it's different. And this is where a lot of the stuff that I talk about, a lot of the teaching is like really, it's getting out of. That's where a lot of the source stuff is this empowerment, true empowerment, not this fake empowerment that most people are kind of talking about. It's this true empowerment, and empowerment from we're move out of that victim state of consciousness into empowerment. We're into the higher consciousness. You start experiencing something that's totally different, and it's life transforming. And that's just in the higher consciousness. Like I said, we wouldn't talk about the super consciousness. Save that for another video. I'll see you in the next one.